You're listening to Lifing Coast to Coast, the live stream podcast where we explore trending topics and personal development, wellness, and the art of lifing in today's ever-changing world. Join us every Saturday for insightful, relatable, and lively discussions that empower and inspire. I'm moderator Miki here with the co-hostesses with the mostesses, Dr. Lovey and Heidi. Oh, are we live? I think we're live. Welcome back to Lifing Coast to Coast. Hello, everybody. We are live on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. And we also have a very special live studio audience here today with us in the Zoom room. So hello to everybody. Please make sure that you use the chat, whether you're in the room here or whether you're on social media. This is going to be a very interactive episode with a really interactive, relatable topic. So please ask questions, make your comments, know that we are live. My name is Miki. Hello, I'm a third of Lifing Coast to Coast. And it is February month, the month of love, also my birthday month. Woohoo! So, what better way to kick it off with an amazing discussion on all things relationships? Whether you are single, in a relationship, or somewhere in between, today's conversation is for you. Make sure you check us out at our website on lifing.services and catch up on all of our past episodes on Spotify, YouTube, Apple Podcast, Amazon, iHeartRadio, all the things. We're everywhere. So today, we're diving deep into relationship dynamics with some truly fascinating topics. We'll break down, we'll explore attachment styles, and we will break down codependency to the empowerment triangle. And then later, make sure you all stick around. We're going to reveal the 4 things that, according to research, are the biggest predictors of a relationship failure. So trust me, you're going to want to hear that. Joining me today, as always, are my 2 lovely co-hostesses with the mostesses, Heidi and Dr. Lovey. Hello.
Hey.
Happy February.
Happy birthday month, Miki. Today's the first day of 28 days of celebrating, right?
Oh my gosh, yes. So anyway, first off, enough about me. We're going to get to me later. We're talking about attachment styles. You've probably heard about them. Full disclosure, I've heard of them many times, but I've never taken like the quiz, the attachment style quiz. But the 4 are secure, anxious, avoidant, and disorganized. But what do they really mean in the context of adult relationships? I'm going to kick it off with turning it over to Dr. Lovey. Can you tell us what these 4 attachment styles are and how do they show up in our connection?
Yeah. First of all, I want to put this out there that I am not an expert in attachment styles. I do relationship coaching, and y'all know I'm a doctor of behavioral health, and of course I've studied it, but I'm not an expert in it. But I can tell you what I do know, and we will have a time towards the end, like the last 15 minutes, where our studio audience can even raise their hand and ask questions and be on camera and speak. But we'll take questions throughout in the chats, okay? So yeah, like you mentioned, you've mentioned 4. There's 4 attachment styles. Attachment theory itself tells us explains how early bonding with our caregivers shape our ability to connect with people. So as human beings, right, we're wired for connection, and the quality of our relationships impacts our emotional and our physical well-being. Our ability to form and maintain healthy relationships is a lot of times shaped by our earliest experiences, like in infanthood, right? When that bond is usually formed with our caregivers. If there was any inconsistency, it could have been a parent who was very responsible and loving, but maybe they had to go to work, right? Or maybe they were dealing with postpartum depression, whatever. And none of us, no matter how responsible you are as a parent, none of us are perfect. We do things, we make mistakes, right? That's part of parenting. But if there was any inconsistency or emotional unavailable or physically unavailable parent, or somehow our needs weren't met, we can end up developing an insecure attachment. And that can lead to struggles in adulthood, like difficulty with expressing emotions or fear of intimacy or a pattern of unhealthy relationship dynamics. Um, and I really wanted to say this really quick before we just briefly talk about the four attachment styles and what they are. Our early childhood isn't the only factor, even though it's a high predictor of what your attachment style will be as an adult, because we have life experiences that also shape how we approach relationships. Um,
Yeah.
and many of us unknowingly repeat familiar, even painful patterns. And this is called repetition compulsion, where we unconsciously are attracted to people who allow us to revisit or reenact our past conflicts or our childhood issues in attempt to get it right, right? We just keep doing that. So this is why people with a history of neglect or abuse or emotional inconsistency might find themselves drawn to similar dynamics in adulthood, right? So the four attachment styles are secure attachment, like you said. This is somebody who's comfortable with intimacy and autonomy. The second one is anxious. So this person is going to be more preoccupied with relationships. Sometimes it's called um, um, ambivalent. Uh, there's other names for it. Preoccupied, right? So there's fears of abandonment, and this insecurity is usually looking for some kind of reassurance and may come off as being clingy, right? And then the third one is avoidant. Sometimes it's called dismissive, and this person might avoid closeness. They value independence. They might be emotionally distant. Um, Sometimes there's that fear also of taking care of somebody and then that person becoming dependent on them. Um, that's part of it too. And the fourth one is fearful avoidant, or anxious avoidant, and that is a disorganized one where there's both the desire for intimacy and then the fear, and then there's this push pulling that happens, like, I hate you, don't leave me, right? So,
Yep. Know that. Know that really well.
ah, so I'm sure, when we think about these, we can probably see ourselves and other people that we've dated and things like that, right? Do you see any of these? You, Heidi or Miki, see any of those? Like when I'm saying what those things are, can you think of relationships or characters that match that description?
Tell us, Heidi.
Well, yeah, I can think of a lot of uh, characters, presumably, fictional characters in film and books and things of that nature, kind of show up. I guess one of the most obvious ones, well, I'll throw it out there to you, Dr. Lovey. Hannibal Lecter. What type of attachment style for that character?
Whoa, um, that's interesting.
Hannibal
I
Lecter.
That's interesting. I would probably say disorganized, but it could be dismissive avoidant as well.
Yeah, disorganized
Yeah.
is the moniker for that one.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
I'm
yeah,
still very confused by the disorganized one, just
Yeah.
because they can look like some of the other ones, right? All mixed together, kind of.
Yeah.
totally. Yeah,
Yeah. They can come off as being very um caring, and they are, they're people pleasing and very, putting other people's needs before themselves, that fear of abandonment. But then also it can turn off, and there can be a flip where they're very independent. They don't need help anymore. They don't, it can see
It,
very, very cold and hot, very unstable and confusing. You don't know what to expect sometimes.
yeah,
And
this
that
type of
doesn't,
person shows up as just being completely unpredictable. You don't know which version you're going to get, right?
yeah, yeah. And this is the thing, is that we can have different attachment styles depending on the relationship. Like somebody might have a very secure attachment style with their colleagues and their co-workers and at work, but in their, you know, so our attachment style, it dictates how we handle emotional challenges, right? And a securely attached person is going to navigate conflicts and um, threats with more of an openness and a trust, where somebody who is less secure is going to react with anxiety, avoidance, or manipulation. And so when familiarity sits in, when you get comfortable in a relationship, like in a partnership, um, you know, that is when those patterns are going to become more pronounced. So you can have good relationships and deep relationships with other people, and you might not see that um, insecurity, but you can see it in a relationship where there is that connection, right? And that's what leads to conflict and miscommunication in our adult relationships. So that's why identifying the pattern and knowing what your attachment style is can help you to understand why you might struggle with connection, or you might repeat unhealthy patterns. You might feel triggered, or elicit, a strong emotion might be elicited by certain situations. Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, I'm starting to see a lot in all of the different audiences. Hello, everybody. Everyone's kind of seeing themselves in a lot of the different types. So I think my biggest question is, I feel like I am all four in different
Sure.
aspects of my life with different relationships. And so I think I remember you saying something about what's your core
Mhm.
attachment style. What does that mean and how do you figure that
Wow.
out?
That is, so there are tests and stuff, but just, from what the description of what they are, you can kind of figure out where you are based on how you are in your most intimate relationships, how you were with your relationship with your parent. Um,
Hmm.
and it doesn't mean that that's what you still are either. Especially if you've been in therapy and you've been working on yourself for a while, you can.
What attachment style are you, Heidi? Curious.
I am a secure attachment style, which means that I feel confident in relationships and I can express my needs openly and I trust my partners. And, in delving into the why of that, because I work with people and I look at, their attachment styles, and a lot of them have a similar uh, childhood to mine. Infancy is, as Dr. Lovey said earlier, that's attachment style is born through those very formative years beginning at infancy. And although I had a very non-maternal mother, and she was not nurturing um, as we got older, when I was 4 months old, I was handed to a woman to stay with. And she was very nurturing. And in fact, my entire infancy through when I went to kindergarten, I had two carers, and they were both amazing women who loved me dearly. So my primal, attachment style is very secure. And, when I have had more insecure attachments, those have been emerging as a young adult out in the world, in the workplace, for example, where I didn't quite know where I fit in yet, that I was more needy or dependent, in that way. But in my romantic relationships, if I had to lean anywhere other than secure, it would have been dismissive. It would have been like, I can't with
Yeah.
you. Yeah.
Mhm. I
I
very
I
much.
was going to ask you about that, because so that makes sense, Heidi, because you probably would have been more of an avoidant, dismissive attachment style, because if you have somebody that's not emotionally there for you during that infant period, especially, your primary caregiver, that's a lot of times what happens, because you learn to be independent and you learn not to depend on other people, um, to take care of you. You learn not to trust, that other people are going to be there for you, and you had somebody step in, and give you that security when you were really young, so you had that need met.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I did, as a behavior, I hated summer because there was no school. And when there was no school, there was no mommy. And come September every year, boom, I attached right to whoever was in the front of the classroom. It was almost always a woman. In fifth grade. It threw me to the ground that it was a dude. I didn't have issues with my dad, only with my mom. And I was like, I don't want Mr. Hauser,
That's
I
so,
didn't get a mommy in fifth grade, and that was a problem.
that's so interesting. Okay, couple question. I see a couple comments. Saul says, I'm depressingly disorganized. Now what? So, if you have an attachment style and you want to take more steps to becoming more secure, I think either Heidi or Dr. Lovey, what do you think are some steps to becoming more secure?
Well, the key points, of the styles we've honed in on those. So to nurture a more secure attachment style, it involves a lot of self-reflection, which, I know the person who wrote the question, I know that the person's done an ample amount of self-reflection, right? Healthy boundaries, emotional regulation, and really effective communication. And that self-awareness piece, for a lot of people, you can get that through journaling, mindfulness, identifying any activators within your interpersonal relationships. The self-esteem, focus in on a lot of positive self-talk. Really up your self-care game. Set attainable goals that pull you into this secure attachment style in your relationships. How to have open communication is, one really effective way. And really clear boundaries. Whenever we blur lines with people, we walk away from a secure attachment. We either avoid it, or we push it away, or whatever. But limits, saying no, and then respecting the other person's boundary. It's a two-way street, right? And as far as our emotional regulation, we are emotional beings, that's part of the whole human experience, right? So just feeling your feels, identifying them, working with them, accepting them, and when we do that, when we accept our own form of emoting, then we can share in our relationships. And this is not just for intimate or romantic relationships. This is familial, or even in the workplace, right? It's like, yeah, I do get really upset when I get non-constructive criticism. And you can say that in a meeting, and they're like, we get so emotional. Well, because I do, and that's okay. Just be clear about it. And that's the final point, communication, communication, communication. We have two ears and one mouth for a reason. Active listening. Listen to what the other person is saying. Really synthesize it, right? And, being clear. Clear is kind. Saying to the other person, I am angry because, not like, well, you make me feel really bad. That's not, active communication. That's not telling people what's real, right? And working toward conflict resolution. The whole goal of this is to have healthier relationships, and if, someone reaches across the table and puts a fork in your plate, and you're like, oh my God, don't you ever touch my fucking food. Okay, that's a little extreme, but they will not forget, it's like, we have to be clear, we
Yeah.
have to throw it out there.
Yeah, absolutely. And a lot of the work after you identify what attachment style you have, a lot of the work is going to be individual before you even step into dealing in your relationship with other people. It's going to be about your relationship with yourself and understanding what that core wound is. So, for example, if I have an anxious attachment style, right? I'm preoccupied. I'm frequently texting my partner. They don't respond quickly. I have this fear of rejection. I'm blowing up their phone. And so I see I'm anxious, occupied. And a lot of this too is at a subconscious level. For example, let's say, I had a really responsible parent and sometimes they weren't there. And or they learned they learned let the child cry it out, that type of thing. And so I I feel like I'm afraid that I might get abandoned. Um, that is at a subconscious level. I don't remember that time before I was 2 years old. Most people don't. Um, and that's just in our bodies, right? So it's subconscious. So really recognizing what is my what is that wound? What is my um, what what's the implicit contract that's happening here? What am I really needing? What am I looking for? I don't feel worthy, right? I don't feel wanted. That is my wound. And so that's what I have to work on. And it is a subconscious thing, but we can change our language and the way that we speak to ourselves. That's what mirror work is, looking at yourself and telling yourself that you're worthy. And if you can't believe it, then it's possible for me to think that I'm worthy. I want to believe that I'm worthy. So changing that language in our brain doesn't really hear it's possible, or I want to. Our brain just hears I'm worthy. And it kind of goes back to that whole thing of we have negativity bias, right? If I say, whatever you do, don't think of a pink alligator, that's what you're going to think of. Pink
Yeah.
alligator. You're not going to think, don't think of a pink alligator, right? You're going to think of a pink alligator. So it's the same thing with the way that we speak to ourselves. We'll hear what is being said, even if you're saying it's possible that I'm worthy. So I would say the first thing is, of course, identifying it, like Saul said, and then recognizing what that core wound is. And everything that Heidi said is absolutely correct.
Hmm.
Mhm.
I loved what you just said about mirror work. Oh my God, I love it. So, okay, so one more little question about attachment style before we move on. Listening to you talk about this. So what happens when you enter a relationship with someone and they have an attachment style that's like very opposite of yours, or it collides. How do you deal with that? You know?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I think Heidi touched on that a little bit when she was talking about communication, and especially if the one person is secure.
Yeah.
I think just being secure and expressing your needs openly, your concerns openly, being confident um, that there's a modeling that happens there. What do you think, Heidi? I don't,
Yeah, I'm thinking about that in practical application,
yeah,
and for example, if you are basically secure, but you're in a new relationship and you're having some insecurity around that, and you're a little bit more needy than your own independence would warrant, right? You're putting yourself out there, you're feeling exposed, a little vulnerable, right? And let's say that person is a dismissive avoidant. So here you are, you're basically secure, you're feeling a little needy, and that person is doing the I go my own way, and they're, and you're, shooting them a text like, I'm heading out, see you there. And you're not getting any dots even there, then all of a sudden, what do you have? You have some insecurity welling in you. You also have information about what the other person's attachment style is, right?
right.
You get there and they're like, what? I said I'd be here at 5. It's 5. What's your problem? Right. Then you've got that person, that's just going to be like, yeah,
Yeah,
don't
that's
track me
that's personal, Heidi. It's personal.
down.
I'm pretty avoidant in my intimate relationships, but that's
Yeah.
hilarious.
And so that person that you're with would have to earn your trust
Yeah. Oh
and give
yeah.
you
Trust is
space as well.
huge. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah. I find the most interesting is disorganized, because they're so sensitive to their environments. They're so perceptive, and it I think that a lot of that might have to do with their environments growing up being you know, could, they didn't know what they were going to expect. And so it's like they can read people and they're really good at that. So even though there's that push pull and they have some of that with them, they're very perceptive people. So it's not all negative, right? With these insecure attachment styles, there's positive things that come from them. And the hope is that, once you realize it, that you work on, your becoming more secure in your attachment style.
And, cautionary tale, being secure, a secure attachment style has its own potential pitfalls. You get too comfortable and you're not paying attention to your partner. You
Yeah.
don't recognize, that they, may need more from you. And so, never, it's all about that open communication.
Yeah,
Keep it real.
absolutely.
Yeah, it's so interesting because I've had such a secure attachment in my relationship with my husband, but I've recognized um, some unhealthy dynamics in some other relationships that I've had. And I know we're going to talk about some other stuff later, but do you,
Yeah,
Mickey, what about
we're
you?
gonna get into it. First, I just want to remind everybody if you just signed on onto our live feed, hello, this is Lifing Coast to Coast. We are a podcast talking about all things lifing. Please check out our website, which is lifing.services, and we're everywhere. We're on social media, we're on all the podcast platforms, and we're talking about relationships today. And I want to talk about I want to talk about codependency. Dang it.
Yeah.
And this relationship triangle that Dr. Lovey you've taught me about. So I've heard you speak about unhealthy roles that we can
Yeah.
play in the codependency triangle. What is codependency? What are the roles in that triangle that people get stuck
Yeah,
in?
that's exactly what I was thinking about, is the relationship that I've had. You know how I said before that we have that um, pattern, no matter how painful it can be, how we repeat and we reenact some of our relationships that we've had. And I've had female friends where I've tried to reenact my relationship with my mother, and to try to get it right. And I've seen some weird codependent, not weird, but some interesting codependency patterns that I don't see in my marriage, that's very secure and very healthy. So it's really interesting. Codependency is when somebody else's needs are being put above another person's, basically, right? And the opposite of that would be interdependency, and this is when both people needs are just as important. There's a partnership, they're equal. But we also have counterdependency, which I didn't even think of until we were talking about dismissive avoidant, because somebody who is dismissive avoidant would be counter independent. They don't need, um, they downplay their emotions, they avoid deep conversations, they're very independent.
Yep.
Sometimes they might feel overwhelmed when people get too close. So you were talking about the triangle. Um, so this is the thing is there are three different, oh, there it goes again. I forgot to turn it off. There are three different roles that we can get into when we're in a relationship that's not healthy. And um, we might find ourselves drawn more to one role, but we can kind of go around the triangle. And so the one role would be the bulldozer, which would be like a dictator, the critic, the dominator, the intimidator. And the next role would be the savior, the fixer, protector, the overhelper, or the martyr. A lot of times this might be called an enabler. The bulldozer might be called a persecutor, right? And on the other side, you have the person who's passive, the passive one, who might have learned helplessness, feel disempowered, they feel defeated, they have self victimization that happens, right? And even if you are healthy and secure, you can be pushed into one of those roles. So, yeah, like if somebody's a bulldozer, right? They're controlling and they are, um, maybe self righteous and they're critical and they push you into that role of feeling incapable. And then you're acting like a victim now, right? Um, and that happens even with secure people. It happens. Yeah.
I there's just so much.
Yeah.
There's so much here. I'm just copying pasting these three types.
I can
Um
put in a picture. I don't know if it would make it to the.
won't make it to the live stream, but
Okay.
we'll
So
definitely put it in the show notes.
Mhm.
yeah, and as far as the triangle goes, that first point on the triangle is fixing or rescuing,
Yeah.
where that's where the sacrifice or martyrdom can, coexist, right?
Mhm.
And you know that person tries to become indispensable to their partner, like, offering and expecting to be their everything, and while concurrently neglecting their own needs, right? And this may feel like love to a codependent, but it isn't, right? And the sacrificing, you pay a huge price there, because what the codependent is wanting is validation, is love, is attention in return, right? And it's typically from someone who is either unable or unwilling, to give that attention back. And so when it doesn't work, then the codependent becomes angry or domineering, bullying, judgmental, aggressive, either passive aggressive or actually aggressive, right?
Mhm.
And that fixing becomes kind of a demand, right? And that codependent is trying to maintain the control,
Mhm.
often with someone who has their own controlling agenda or other tactics, right?
Yep.
And so this stage gets followed by that victimhood piece, and where the codependent doesn't value themselves, defers to others, sort of subjugates or takes a submissive position, and then they adopt that woe is me, getting pouty or needy or complaining all the time, but just generally feeling downtrodden, and tends to be finger pointing, blaming others
Mhm.
for their situation, right?
Yeah.
And in that attention that they gain from that, then the cycle starts again. That's how the triangle just keeps going around and around,
Yeah,
so
What's so interesting is that, as you're talking about, even though, I was saying what they were, as you were talking about it, I was thinking, gosh, you know what? I can see myself in all three of those roles, even in my healthy relationship. When I have felt defensive or um, perceived criticism, like that, like perceived attack, I have been that person that is all of a sudden, the victim or, incapable or helpless, or I switch it around and I become, the person that is persecuting in some way, because of my defensiveness. And I've seen myself, like even in my relationship with my son, who's, generally, emotionally healthy, where I become this person who's an overhelper. And it almost puts him in a position where he is handicapped in some ways because of my over helping, Yeah.
that's definitely, I mean, I relate very much to the enabler. And I used to even make that a point to be like, I seek out people who need to be fixed because I exist to solve the problems.
Yeah.
And like, yeah, I think that that is, isn't it so directly correlated to people pleasing and, those kinds of tendencies? And I feel like
we
until
want
I really go
we
ahead.
want to be liked, we
Yeah,
want
we
to.
want to, yeah, I want to be liked. And until I started like learning about what boundaries are and about like actually taking care of me first, I didn't know there was any other way to be in a relationship.
Yeah. Yeah. So I wanted to ask y'all, because you just talked about that, and I wanted to ask you, do you see yourself pushed into certain roles with particular people that you interact with, that they try to push you into one of those roles of either being the victim or being an enabler or being, the guilter or the intimidator in some way?
Not anymore. I
Okay.
think part of being the elder statesman in the class here is that
Mhm.
I've gotten to this point of, I know what you see is what you get, with my siblings, for example. And I have been, the bulldozer. I have been, I have been the victim. I've been everybody on the triangle. I've done that song and dance many, many times. And now I have a very avoidant attachment style, intentionally, not dismissive, just straight up honest avoidance. Like, I'm not going there. Like, I will tell people all day long, do not go to that dry well with your bucket. And it's the same thing in codependence. If you recognize that you're going to have to be in a role, figure out, how to navigate around that. But so the short answer, Dr. Lovey, to that question is not anymore, but it's because I only have a handful of relationships. That's the
Yeah.
other part. That's the other part. You weed out, and I don't want any unhealthy relationships. I'm beyond wanting to deal. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
Smaller circle.
smaller
What
circle.
about
Get that.
what about you, Mickey? Do you see yourself?
So I really work very actively. And you even said that tying it into being avoidant. I work so actively hard not to be helpless at every moment of my life. I'm like, I got it. I can do it. I can take care of myself everywhere with every relationship. I never see myself as that third point of being
Mhm.
passive. Um, I'm always enabling and sometimes criticizing. And I think that just speaks to me being avoidant.
Yeah. So that's that
Yeah.
counter dependence, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
We have a lot of stuff in the
there's a
chat
lot of
here.
stuff I'm trying to keep
Yeah.
up here. Um, okay, I was in this triangle last summer. As the savior, I had to learn to take a step back and let the victim set boundaries and realize I could not change the dictator.
Mm.
Ooh,
Yeah.
so there's like a question of like how if you're feeling like you are being pushed
Yeah.
and pulled,
Yeah.
um, how do you shift out of,
Right.
being helpless?
So that person was feeling what? Like they were in the role of
They were the savior.
the savior or the dictator?
It says, I was the savior and I had to learn to take a step back and not
Okay.
and let the victim set their own boundaries.
Okay. Yeah. So that's the thing. So if you find yourself enabling, the important thing to do is to you can switch gears and become more of a coach, right? And a coach is somebody who's going to be curious. They're going to look at that person as not being broken, not being helpless. They're going to look at that person as being a creator, somebody who can thrive, somebody who's capable, somebody who's whole, somebody who's resilient. And if you're doing that, then you're going to be coaching that person. You're going to set up boundaries with that person. It doesn't mean that you don't support them. It doesn't mean that you're not helping them. But that's how you show them, I believe in you. I believe in you. You got this. And I'm here if you fall down, but
Mm.
I'm not going to do it for you, you know? So you can go into from that savior role, you can go into a coach role.
Yeah, I love how coach is. Can you talk about this? How can they switch into the different rather than being an enabler, becoming a coach?
Yeah,
Did you
yeah,
say that already?
yeah. By looking, recognizing that that person is whole. And that's for both, really. Like the bulldozer, the critic, the dominator, the intimidator, the persecutor, the self righteous person, the fixer, the martyr. Uh, both of those roles would have to be able to step back and look at the person that is, helpless or disempowered, defeated, the person who is displaying inadequacy, They would have to look at them as not being broken and look at them as being whole and resilient. And when they do that, the bulldozer can shift into being more of a challenger. This is somebody who's a straight shooter. This is the person, like, think of your grandma or somebody in your life who loved you unconditionally, but they told you the truth. They motivated you. They were there for you to consult with them, and they gave you feedback. They didn't necessarily criticize you, though. So that you can switch from being that bulldozer, the persecutor, to being a challenger, and you can switch from being that savior to being a coach. And when you do that, it empowers that person who um, is in that, displaying inadequacy role.
Mm.
And
So,
if somebody pushes you in that role,
yeah.
then you have to remind yourself, I'm capable, I'm whole, and I'm a creator, and set those boundaries with those people.
Oh, you answered my
And
question. Yeah. So, yeah, if they're not helping you, if you are that, helpless person, if you feel helpless and they're not helping you at all, like what is a really good example of a first boundary you can set to become a creator for either of you?
well, when you're in that bottom of the triangle, when you're feeling victimized or persecuted, or, basically that frustration is not being seen or heard or acknowledged as whole, right? We are all
Yeah.
naturally creative, resourceful, and whole. We are.
Yeah.
And when people don't see us as such, how do we change their mind? Right?
Yeah.
That's where we step out, right? We've got to step out. And I'll use a classic case, and that would be the uh, abused female in a heterosexual relationship. All right, being domineered. I'll just say emotionally abused. Okay, in this case, right? That person needs to have enough faith and confidence in themselves that they can confide in another human, right? That is where I see that step one. So we need to have someone who can see us as whole, right? That's the first thing. If it's not ourselves, we need someone to mirror that for us, to say to us, "You've got this, girl. You can do this. Let's talk about all the hard things you've done in the past. Remember when? Tell me the last time you did something that really required you to pull yourself up and out." And they can remember, and then you empower them, right? So there's that need to step outside of ourselves often when we're down there, so someone can help us see and help us feel our strength again. And I see this a lot in the work that I do. Once those people get this sense of, "Oh yeah, I know who I am. I You're right. I did this and I can do that. And when I was younger, I was the one that da 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 da, right?" And so people blossom when they are empowered, but people really, really come out of their shells when they empower themselves. So
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
good.
I love that what you said about making connections, building community, connecting with other people outside of the unhealthy relationship. And
yeah,
there's going to be kickback. Even if the person isn't, nobody, I don't think, I mean, unless they're a sadist or whatever, most people aren't, their intention isn't to be a bully. It isn't to be a critic and intimidator. That's not their goal. Um, but that's the role that they have taken on a lot of times. And it's going to be uncomfortable for them when you get healthier, because they're going to be like, well, where do I fit in? Or if they're the helper, the enabler, how am I going to fit into this relationship now? Um, and I think building connections, and like you were saying, Heidi, um, somebody else seeing you, somebody else hearing you, and believing in you. I think that that's helpful. And of course, ultimately, it's going to have to be you believing in yourself. But sometimes it takes that, right?
yeah, yeah.
Um,
It's always seeking connection as humans, and seeking the right
Yeah.
connection, you know.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I want to get to it. We teased at the beginning of the podcast that there's these four things, according to research, that predict the demise of a relationship. I want to discuss what they are, and what they do when they show up in relationships. What do we do?
Yeah, and this has gone by so fast, and I want to get to all of the questions in the chat. So I'll briefly talk about this. So there's um, research. There was these love labs, right? And they looked at um, how these couples interacted, and these were straight couples, homosexual couples, different race couples. They looked at all different couples, and this is Gottman's research, and they saw that there was 4 characteristics that kept coming up in relationships where there was high unsatisfaction, where there was going to be a separation or a divorce within a couple of years, and there is this you were talking about a triangle, there's this kind of loop. So the first one is criticism and the second one is defensiveness, and they kind of go together. So you have the person who's attacking, and then you have the person who becomes defensive. Even if the person's intention isn't to attack, it's perceived as attack. So there's that criticism. They attack the person's character rather than their behavior. And so then the other person becomes defensive. And then they're the victim, right? And so then they're deflecting responsibility on the other person. Like, it's all your fault, you know? Um, and so then the next one is contempt. And this is like the most toxic one. It can be done with sarcasm. Sarcasm means to tear the flesh. A lot of times unless you're a comedian making money off of it, it's usually not a good thing to use in certain relationships. Sometimes it can bring levity, whatever. But a lot of times it's hidden anger and there's contempt in there. This is disrespect. This is mocking, showing superiority. Sometimes it can be done with a body language, looking down at somebody, putting, one lip to the side, just, mocking them. So that is one of the highest predictors of a relationship failing. And then the next one is stonewalling. And this is when somebody feels so shut down and they withdraw completely. They don't even communicate at all. And you can't get anywhere that way. Um, so yeah, those are the 4 things. And I've seen myself do all of those things, even in my healthy relationship. And the thing is noticing it and changing the behavior.
And it's a cycle, right?
It
The
is.
behaviors feed into each other.
Mm-hmm.
The criticism from one partner triggers the defensiveness in the other, which fuels more criticism. And as that escalates, then the contempt emerges, right? And
Mm-hmm.
eventually one or both partners may resort to stonewalling to escape
Yeah.
all the negativity, right?
Yeah.
So when we recognize the behaviors in ourselves and our partner, the very first step to break in the cycle again is open and honest communication. We're going around and around.
Yeah.
In my previous marriage, I called it the loop of shit. Here we are in the
Yeah.
loop of shit again. And we want to focus in on specific behaviors rather than the personal attacks. That's not, that's really crucial. And then taking responsibility for your own actions and
Yes.
actively working to change your communication style to de-escalate
Yes.
the conflict and hopefully rebuild the trust. But yeah, it's cyclical. And we all know that couple, we're like, oh my god, they're gonna fight.
Yeah.
We've all been exposed to what that looks like and feels like, right? So
Yeah. You know what I thought about right now when you were talking, Heidi, is I have a good example of the defensive criticism loop and then an example of the opposite. And the opposite is with you. Something that happened with you. Okay, so in the first example, I showed up 15 minutes early and the person was still getting ready, you know, and as they were getting ready, I was like, okay, they're getting ready. And I went and I did a couple of things. And then it was time to leave. And they're standing by the door. Right. And it was already like 2 minutes after. They weren't even ready on time. And then they were like, you're always late. And I was like, I was here 15 minutes early. What are you? But they know I have time blindness, right? And they didn't want to take responsibility. That wasn't the issue, though. There was something else going on, right? And I got defensive, right? And I was like, what are you talking about? I was here 15 minutes early and I think I've been late once, that kind of thing. And so then this was just like this cycle with something that happened a couple weeks ago, right? I came into the meeting that we were going to have like maybe about 10 minutes early, and um it was a couple minutes before the podcast was going to start, right? And I wasn't sitting in front of the camera. You could have exploited my, and not known, because you are secure and you know how to communicate. What you told me later was, I feel anxious when you're not in front of the camera 5 minutes before we start. And that was helpful. That was specific to where I'm like, oh, well, that's doable. I don't want you to feel anxious. I can make sure that I'm in front of the camera. And, that is how you change that, right? That dynamic. You use the I feel, and this is what I need. I feel anxious and I need this, and then it's not going to be, then I can now take responsibility instead of being defensive, right? So,
Yeah.
yeah, that's what came to mind when you were talking right now.
And my codependent self would have turned the clocks back in the house so that you had your ass in the chair 10 minutes ahead.
That's funny.
It's amazing. Real life example, people.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
I love what Jules said here. I learned that it was not okay to express any of my needs or feelings in relationships from the time I was very small. I didn't realize that I was bringing that into relationships.
Yeah.
Um, it's only been over a year. I've been doing work on myself. I'm learning how to communicate my needs. Can reparenting yourself be a helpful way to help move towards a
Yes.
secure attachment style?
I love that.
And,
Yes.
and
Yes.
how? And how do you reparent yourself?
Yes. That is such a great question, Jules. Um, and do we want to give people the opportunity to raise their hand now, or?
Absolutely. Yeah,
Okay.
the live stream will go off and we'll have time to
Okay, okay, cool.
for everybody.
Yeah, we can reparent ourselves. If we don't get those messages that we needed to hear within a certain window of time, we will become codependent and we will start looking for those things, those messages from everybody, our children, our boss, our coworkers, et cetera, et cetera. And we really won't be able to get that from them. Maybe in the beginning, like Heidi was saying, to get you into that place where you feel seen and you feel heard. But ultimately, you have to give yourself those messages. And you can do that with reparenting. You can do the mirror work. And like I said before, even if you can't say, I'm worthy yet, you can get a picture of that little 4-year-old you that was worthy. I mean, you can look at that little version of you and you can say those affirmations to that little version of yourself. And if that's still very difficult, then you can say, like I said, I it's possible for me to believe that I'm worthy, something like that. Yeah, that was a great question, Jules. Thank you.
Mm. Let me see here. There's so much. I don't know. Let's see. Do you believe in relationship soulmates, or do you think strong
Ooh,
relationships are built rather than destined?
that's a deep question.
Oh, no. My hopeless romantic wants destiny all the way. But as a woman on her third marriage, hopefully final one, but I
Has
would
there been contempt or criticism there? No, I'm just kidding.
but it I do believe that there are these people that are just meant to be. I think I've seen a handful over the course of my lifetime. And and it's been bore out. There was a couple in high school, Tom and Gigi. Tom and Gigi.
I thought you were going to say Tom and Jerry.
No, no, but she had a sister named Jerry. Anyway, point is they were that perfect it couple and whatever. And I know that he passed recently, and they were still the loves of each other's life, and I think there's something to that. But I also think, it's what we've talked about here today, learning to be secure, figuring out how to have open communication, respecting the other, not
Yeah.
wanting to have any kind of triangle, but wanting to have that beautifully interwoven relationship where you're totally fine over here by yourself, they're totally fine over here by themselves, but when you come together, then it's, it's a good thing. It's, it's a
Yeah.
positive thing.
There's one question I want to address before the Facebook cuts off. Rachel's asking, what age do children or babies need to hear these messages? I'm quite mindful of attachment, but I still worry I haven't done enough when they were like babies.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah. So there's this window of time that we need to hear messages, and of course, the formative years, the first couple years, infancy, are going to be really important for bonding. Um, and as far as hearing those messages that you are loved, that you are worthy, and it doesn't always have to be with words, actions, right? That the window of time for the primary caregiver to give you those messages is before preteen years, that you have to get those messages. There are later messages, like later in life messages, that you need to hear during your teen years, like, you know, uh, you're allowed to love a partner of your choice. I'll be there to pick you up. But those are later teen messages. But there's early messages that we need, before the preteen years. Yeah.
Sounds like a lot of time, actually. That's good.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah. And I
Uh,
believe that my husband is my soulmate, so that, but we've had to work on it. We've had to work on it because
Yeah.
when we first got together, y'all know my husband's a few years younger than me. He was very dismissive, avoidant, and I was very anxious, because I had such a negative experience in my previous relationship. And I was the more, you know, clingy one, and fear of abandonment. And he was afraid to connect because then he would be abandoned. You know what I mean? So but we were soulmates, and everything is completely different. Like every personality test we've ever taken, like Myers-Briggs, exact opposite in everything.
mm,
But I think that we're soulmates, and I think that we care and we work on it. And so we kind of grew together emotionally. So I think it's both. I think you can have a soulmate and not want to work on it.
and and many soulmates. It's not
Mhm.
just your
Yeah.
romantic partner too. It's, your other people like you, DL.
Yeah.
You're my
Yeah.
you're my person that way.
Yeah.
It's like we
Yeah.
met each other later in life, big time, and it was like, oh my God, you,
Yeah.
wow, you're here. This is so amazing,
Right.
So that happened.
She's my beastie from the Eastie.
That's it. You're my bestie from the Westie.
my last question that I have before I open it up to everyone else, what's one small daily habit that you believe, either of you, makes the biggest difference in keeping your relationship strong every day?
Don't bring up little shit. Little stuff doesn't matter. That erodes the relationship. I've talked about this example before, but my husband, when he works in the kitchen and he cooks, he's amazing, opens every drawer and every cupboard and leaves them open. It's bizarre. And I have never said a word. I have chosen to go in, close them quietly. If he's right there, I'll just hug him and say, thanks so much for cooking. That stuff just isn't important, you guys. And we get so weird about that. You left the toilet seat up. Come on,
Yeah.
it wasn't a booby trap. It feels like a booby trap. I'm not going to lie. I've been there. It feels like a booby trap. But people sweat the small stuff, and that will erode your relationship. So
Yeah. Yeah. For me, I think that the most important thing is what's called bids, like turning to instead of turning away. Like if my husband, if we're driving past something and he's like, "Oh, isn't that such a beautiful sunset?" Instead of me being on my phone, "Yeah, yeah, it looks nice." Putting down my phone, and even if I'm not interested, looking, turning, and paying attention because it's important to him, right? I think that those things are important. And the toilet seat not being down is more forgivable, right? When you have moments of, like Heidi was talking about, of the other person turning to you, right? And seeing you and paying attention, listening. Um, yeah.
I love that. All right, live stream. It looks like our time has come. Please make sure that you subscribe to all of our podcast things, links, channels. We're on Spotify, Apple Pods, YouTube. We're going to have the replay done, which will include post question format. So be sure that you are subscribing to us and check out our website, lifing.services. Thank you for tuning in. We love you all. And please, please comment on our stuff so we can maybe get you in the room next time. All right, bye, live stream. And with that, I want to
Yay.
open it up for any questions here in the
And this
room.
will be on YouTube, right?
Yeah, this
Yeah.
whole thing. Yeah, we're
Mhm.
gonna.
So,
Yeah.
so
Anybody
if
have
you don't feel
questions?
comfortable being on camera, you know.
Yeah, you can be
You're
off
about to
camera.
be exposed to 16 people.
Or, put it in the chat if you have a question.
Right, our one viewer.
Yeah, we do have one viewer on YouTube. I want to read this for you guys. Robinette just said, my husband and I are both listening to this, and it's been awesome because we are going to take a closer look at the roles we both take on. It's
All
awesome.
right.
Healthy.
Yeah.
It is so healthy. It's a continual thing.
Yeah.
It really is. And like I said, I have a very wonderful relationship, and we go through periods where there's hurt or there's miscommunication or you know um, there's a poke that I don't even know that I stabbed at, or a wound, right? That wasn't completely healed, that now I've opened it. And yeah. And I had a gross image. I've told you guys about the horses and how they heal, or donkeys and how they heal. And, you have one that gets cleaned out and then another one that doesn't. And they can look the same on the surface. But then when you peel back the scab, this one doesn't go. And this one has maggots that are eating underneath. And there's been times where that's happened, or when that's happened to me, and a wound that really wasn't healed was opened up and there's maggots there. And I'm blaming my husband for whatever he said, but he didn't say anything that was critical or whatever. It was because I still had this wound, and wanting to make things work is important, because sometimes there have been times where I just want to be right. Knowing that too is important. You know, I just want to be right. I just feel like being angry, you know. And let's
Yeah.
and then that you can get past it then, right?
Absolutely. All right, I see three hands. We're gonna go with three
Yeah.
hands and then we're gonna cut it off there. So let's go with Saul. Hello.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are in this great big world. Um, great, great course. I have two things. Um, so the three roles in unhealthy relationship, the ability to transform from those roles. I'm missing one. I have the savior, the ability to transform into coach. And then I kind of just went with it, and from innocent, I said transform into the hero. Not sure if I'm running down the right path on that. But persecutor, what do they transform into? What's
That would
their
be more
ability?
like, yeah, that would be more of a challenger role. Um,
Challenger. Okay.
Challenger. And so the person who is self-victimized, that's helpless, would have to go into an empowerment role, believing that they are a creator, believing that they're capable, believing that they're resilient, and
Okay. And
bulldoze
the innocent transform
the
Creator, right?
the creator. Yeah, creator, the
into the
empowered
okay.
one. Hmm.
Okay. Okay.
And the savior would be more of like a coach, an encourager, somebody who's supportive but empowering at the same time.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Awesome. All right. Thank you very much. I
Yeah,
appreciate it.
you're welcome. Was there something else too?
No, that was it. That was it. Thank you.
Thank you, Saul. That
Good,
was good.
So,
good. Taking notes. Hello, Susie. How you doing? Glad you made it in here.
Yeah, I had a hard time, but thank you so much for inviting me. I kept thinking I didn't know the format. I kept thinking, oh my God, they're going to call on me. But I love the format, and what a great meeting. Thank you so much. I
Thank you.
think, I don't know, it was great. And I related to everything that I wrote down that you said. It's enlightening. So thank you so much.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for
Thank you,
being.
Susie, for being here.
I love having the room. And then we've got Jules. Let me prompt you.
Hey, thanks for having me. This was awesome. And something that I really need to work on because, yeah, I avoid relationships and I dismiss people whenever they get too close. And it's something that I've been aware of for a few months. And yeah, I was wondering if y'all have any resources for a DA like me that I could maybe look into and learn more about it, or yeah, because like I know some about it, but not really enough. And yeah, I want to try and figure it out so I can work towards being more secure. So yeah, just putting it out there. I don't want to just like find some, you know, false information on Google. So yeah, just thought I'd ask.
Can I defer to Miki and Heidi? Because I know Miki has said that she's dismissive avoidant, and I know Heidi has worked very closely with clients who have been dismissive avoidant. Is that okay? Can I defer
Yeah,
with this? Okay. Okay.
Please
yeah.
to you, because I.
Well, um, I'll ask her, Jules, but there's somebody else in a community that we share that would be a really good person for you to talk to, because this person's done a deep dive and has found one particular person who talks about it on one of the platforms. I don't remember what it is, but
Sure.
has learned a multitude about it there. And, you know, getting accurate information. I, want to honor you first of all for, asking in this way, because yeah, we can all Dr. Google all day long
Right.
and get just a bucket of misinformation, you know. But I think, in terms of the work that you're going to be doing, you recognize what it is, you recognize how it interferes, how it blocks you from true connection, and so I will share a little segment from working with this person that proved really effective. So this person was in a new relationship, like a brand new relationship, right? And had discovered, oh my God, this is my attachment style. I'm a hot mess express. And I'm like, no, you're a work in progress, like all of us. But anyway, so after discovering this and after doing the deep dive that I just shared that this person did, um, you know, this person was excited about it and talking about it, because there was finally, it was like, I'm not crazy. I'm not, like it just felt so good to not be alone and not feel like, the lone person. And then said, okay, so now we're getting together. It's happening. Now what do I do? And I'm like, well, talk about it. She goes, talk about what? I'm like, talk about what you discovered about yourself. What? Talk about, yeah, talk about it, right? Talk about that.
Yeah.
I know. And guess what happened? This person talked about it, and the other person said, I am so glad you told me this. And the other person took the assessment, got their, style. And now it's been, gosh, I want to say 6 months, at least, maybe 9, maybe I'm off on the numbers, and the relationship has grown out of that very thing.
Mm.
And the shifting of the attachment style has been taking place in real time. So I wanted to say that because you don't have to fix yourself before going and testing the waters in a way that you've got this newfound information, right? So I hope that was helpful, but I will be reaching out to you separately.
Yeah, thank you very much. Super helpful. Appreciate that.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts, Miki, being?
I just think
Yeah.
that for me, I am also a work in progress. I think any communication is good communication. I saw someone put in bold communication. Um, so for me, I know that being avoidant eventually it's gonna bubble up to the surface. And I usually let it out, and it's not always pretty and it's not always the right time. But I know that every time I do get something out and, express how I'm feeling, that's that's progressed. That's
Yeah.
better than not and just ignoring the problem forever.
Yeah. I have found myself, yeah, like I was saying with the relationship with my husband in the beginning, how he was dismissive avoidant. And I've had to really look at that reenactment and what would attract me to somebody who was dismissive avoidant. And what I realized, and this is what I found with some of my friendships, is that because my mom was disorganized, but what was very painful to me were those times when she would just shut down and cut me off. And there was a time I mentioned this before with some of you that and it's there's no disrespect to my mom. She had her stuff right, and she did the best she could. Um, and it was her. She didn't talk to me for about 3.5 months or something like that when I was about 10 years old because she was ashamed of me for the way I talked to her. I don't even remember what it was, but she completely ignored me and acted like I didn't exist. And that has really made an impact on and feeling not heard. It even if it's like, okay, I need to take a break for a minute. I mean, my husband has to literally say that. He can't even walk to the other room while we're in a discussion or I start getting into this threat response of, and so I know that and I've worked on it and so I don't get threatened anymore with that. But it was in the beginning it was like that. But it was trying to make it right, getting into relationships. And I have a couple of friends, but one friend 3 times during our friendship, she completely blocked my phone number. I mean, for no reason. I mean, and then just showed up like nothing was ever wrong. But and I kept, and until the last time where I was just like, how many times am I going to put my hand out and get bit? Right. Like this person's going to bite me, it's going to happen. So yeah, that's such a trip that, I think about that being on the other side of it. Cause I'm not, I would lean more towards the clingy or the anxious than the dismissive, right?
Oh, this is so good. We can go forever, but we can't. Thank you both. Thank you all so much for coming in here today. Um, yeah, we're gonna keep rocking it. We'll see you all next time. If there is a topic or something you want us to do on a podcast, please reach out to us. I just put in the chat all of the ways that you can connect with us. There's the link tree, which will take you to all of the podcast distributors as well. And yeah, get on our website, get on our Instagram, comment, DM us. You know where to
I
find
think
us.
that each one of these topics, the the attachment styles, the unhealthy triangle, and then also the 4 things that are the demise of a relationship, could be a whole topic with an expert that we could interview because I mean it's you could go so deep into all of that. Yeah, I think that would be really good, especially this month if we could
I
find
wanted
something.
I wanted to do the attachment style quiz with all the movie roles that I found. It was
Oh my
Ooh.
God, we didn't even do the movies.
Yeah. So, tell Heidi, what are some famous characters that are in the different attachments before we wrap it up?
okay, so Carrie Bradshaw, Sex in the City, anxious attachment. Let's see, Don Draper. There's your dismissive avoidant right there. Um, let's see what else.
And Ron Weasley from Harry Potter
There you go. There, yeah,
is
That one's
secure.
secure.
He's
Yeah. Yeah.
secure.
yeah. He's secure. Han Solo. This one might surprise you.
Avoidant, dismissive.
Very
Yes,
avoidant.
Yeah.
yes, yes. Mulan. Do you know the character Mulan?
Yes.
Yes, she would have
Ooh.
secure attachment.
Wow. See, I would have said maybe dismissive, but that's interesting.
I
Okay.
think she goes through an arc. I think
Mm.
a
Yeah.
lot of
Well, yeah, that's true.
characters do.
James Bond.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Definitely dismissive, right?
Definitely dismissive. Bridget Jones, our beloved Renee Zellweger's character.
So anxious.
Anxious. Yeah, totally, totally anxious. Let's see here's a good one for those people who might relate to this one. Good Will Hunting, Matt Damon's character.
Ooh,
Disorganized.
disorganized, yeah.
Right? Because he wants, but he pushes away,
Yeah.
right? Yeah, that's a good one. Let's see. What oh, I know, Rachel Green in Friends, Jennifer Aniston's character.
Oh
Just
yeah.
neurotically, fear of abandonment, very, very much anxious attachment style, right?
Most anxious.
Yeah. Yeah. Anyway, that's a handful of the ones that I found.
That's cool.
Go out into the world and find your favorite characters on TV and figure out which ones they are and drop it on our Instagram.
Oh, there you go. Yeah.
Do
Oh,
it.
Gollum. I forgot Gollum.
Oh,
Oh yeah,
Gollum.
yeah. Disorganized for sure. Yeah.
Totally,
Yeah,
totally
yeah.
disorganized.
Yeah. I see a smirk on Saul's face. Like, why would you put me in the same category as Gollum?
Sorry, Saul. Don't take
All
it.
right.
Don't take it personally.
Thank you for listening to Lifing Coast to Coast. Join us every Saturday for insightful, relatable, and lively discussions that empower and inspire.